All right, joining me today for a very special interview is a guest I've been trying to get on the show for a long time. He's a college football analyst and host for SEC Network. Peter Burns joins us. Peter, again, it's a pleasure to have you on. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Looking forward to doing it. You got two good guests today because you got my daughter Bo Burns as well too. She's 9 months old, and I'm watching her right now. So if you hear, I promise, if you hear her kind of yelling or something, it's nothing bad. We're not watching game film or anything. We're kind of relaxing over here at the house.
The more the merrier. No, absolutely, for sure. So before we dive into, Gamecocks, because obviously this is the Spurs Up Show. This is a Gamecocks podcast. I want to talk a little bit about you. I watched all of SEC Media Days. You and with your new show, the SEC This Morning. Talk a little about that show when you got here. I know that you guys do a great job with that. So expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, me and Marcus Spears, they launched SEC This Morning. So they launched a brand new Sirius XM channel, channel 374, back in March. And so, I've been lucky enough that they asked me to be the anchor of the network when it first launched in 2014. And then when they launched radio, they asked me to do that as well. And I mean, man, me and Marcus have a blast. You know how it is. I mean, no matter where you're from, you got SEC fans all over the map. And so for us, 3 hours every single morning from 7 to 10, we get to talk all about it. And so that's a blast. And then over at Media Days this year, as you saw, they simulcasted it on SEC Network. So, they maybe, kind of we got really good feedback. So maybe there's there's an opportunity for us to start putting that show on the mornings on SEC Network, which would be a really cool way to, especially during football season, to kind of kick off the week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, you guys did a great job at SEC Media Days, and it was a great day to start the day every day. I know that really got. I know for speaking to me personally, got really fired up for college football season. So, and another topic before we dive into the Gamecocks, the college football world is kind of spinning right now, and I think you probably know where I'm about to go with this. Pretty quiet off season until what happened over the past week with the entire. Urban Meyer situation, Ohio State. I'm not sure. You may have given your opinion already, either on Feinbaum or on SEC Network, but I haven't seen your take. Give us just kind of your opinion on what's going on in Columbus and how do you see this whole thing playing out?
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those deals where everybody jumps to conclusions, and honestly, it looks, hey, 98% sure that Urban Meyer knew and that he lied at Big Ten Media Days. But again, I've also dealt with stories around the SEC where I've seen players suspended for something, due to accusations, and found out 3 weeks later that it was all false and made up. And I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think it'll end up being that the fact that Urban Meyer did in fact know. However, I think the biggest thing I take away from this is this. Had Urban at Big Ten Media Days, when asked about them firing Coach Smith, had he just gone into the podium and said, hey, listen, I fired Coach. It's something I should have done, way back in the day, but I didn't. And I absolutely regret that because it was the wrong thing to do. And I take full responsibility for not making that personnel decision earlier. I don't think we're having this conversation, but in the fact that he tried to, it seemed kind of stonewall and kind of quote, get away with it, I think is the reason why it blew up to be such a big deal. So what I've noticed in our life on one way or another, where it's my mistakes that I've made or other mistakes that coaches have made or players, 90% of the time, if you cop to it and say, hey, man, I messed up and I should have handled that differently and I need your forgiveness, we're a forgiving society. I think what people get upset about is when people don't take responsibility or try to pass the buck, and that's when everything tends to blow up.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially when, not only did he adamantly deny it, but also I think he cited the 2015 either allegations or story, basically saying that story was being made up, or he really just tried to kind of belittle those allegations, and I feel like it made it way worse, and it just snowballed into what it is now. So really crazy. I mean, again, it had been a pretty quiet offseason until then.
Yeah, I mean, he tried to kind of say, hey, this was, in essence, kind of fake news, that there's nothing to this, and try to steamroll it. And here's the deal. For Urban, I think he was able to get away with a lot of stuff when things were going well with him at Florida. And nobody really held him accountable to it because they were winning. And to a certain extent, I think the same thing went along at Ohio State, in that no one really looked to hold him accountable because they were always in contention. But, 2018 college football and a sports landscape is light years different than it was back in 2008, 2010.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into the Gamecocks. I'm going to just kind of tackle the beast right up front. You've been very open and vocal about you think South Carolina beats Georgia in that week 2 showdown in Columbia down in Williams-Brice, 3:30 kickoff. We all know it's going to be a raucous atmosphere. And I think I may have even heard you say you think South Carolina's after that going to win the East and go to Atlanta. Talk about just kind of your belief, just looking at this South Carolina team. What makes you think that they're going to be able to take down Georgia in week 2 and then make a run at going to Atlanta this season?
Well, I mean, let's start with the game week 2. I just think with the up-pace offense, I just think with Georgia losing so many key members on defense, I think that this is a way that with the crowd, week 2, Georgia's not going to be pushed by Austin Peay in week 1, that they have an opportunity to come out guns a-blazing, especially with this fast-paced offense, and pop them for 14-0 right off the bat. And I mean, that stadium, like, I'm upset that that's going to be a 2:30 or 3:30 kickoff game. I'm so upset that CBS has that game because I got to work at the SEC network, and I was hoping that it would be a night game so that way I could just roll down to Columbia and see it firsthand. So again, I think the thing overall of why I have a lot of good feelings for it for South Carolina football this year is obviously you get Debo back. But Bentley, to me, coming into this third season, just seems like he's going to be running the offense that he wants with that fast-paced offense. But I think the big thing is Muschamp over, each year Muschamp seems to get better, right? Like first year, I think he had only 4-win talent on that team, and he turned it into 6 or 7. I think the following year, last year, this team probably should have only won 6-7 games, and what? They ended up winning 9. So for me, he finds a way to get the most out of his guys week in and out. And defensively, he's so good that while he's not as talented top to bottom as the roster of Georgia, I think he knows how to put duct tape and baling wire together to make sure that he can do some good things defensively. I still think he's a year away from having the defense that Will Muschamp really wants in Columbia, but I think still it's a way to get a leg up right off the bat against Georgia. And that's a good thing for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And we haven't dropped our official predictions yet for the 2018 season, so I'll save my my outlook for that game. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of buzz going around that game, and I think for good reason as well. I think South Carolina, and they historically played Georgia and Columbia very tough, no matter what the records or the rankings are. So it's going to be, I think, one of those classic South Carolina Georgia games for sure. You mentioned Will Muschamp. He's gotten better and better each year. He's been at South Carolina, and again, you're someone who's been at the SEC network for a while. You've been around college football for a while and this conference for a while. So you've seen Will Muschamp from his days in Florida to now at South Carolina. And you were at SEC Media Days and got to see and hear what Will Muschamp said firsthand. Talk about just kind of what you saw from Will Muschamp and what are your impressions of him heading into his third year at South Carolina?
I told somebody yesterday that if I'm holding my daughter Bo right now, so she's not going to be playing football. But if I had a son and I said, hey, I want you to go play for one SEC coach, I wouldn't want him to play for Saban. I wouldn't want him to go play for Kirby. Not that I don't like him. It's just that my number one draft pick of the coaches would be Will. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen how he coaches his guys in that he demands excellence from them, but also knows kind of when to ride the guys, but also knows when to compliment them and coach them up hard too. I think, he was put into a tough situation when he took over at Florida because of, the previous regime that I think his first go around in Gainesville was about cleaning up that program. So to me, I just think that he's so much comfortable now with the staff that he has, where he's at in South Carolina that, again, that's why I think sky's the limit. And a lot of people were concerned, Muschamp going to South Carolina. I was like, man, you don't know. This dude can flat out coach football, and I think it's a hell of a hire down in Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I was on the bandwagon as far as I liked the Will Muschamp hire. I thought it was good for the program at the time in 2015. I know a lot of people were on the fence, if maybe even critical of the hire, but I think Will Muschamp is, gone above and beyond. I think this year is just going to be another step in that as far as transitioning to that up-tempo offense, proving that he can not only win with a great defense, but win with a really solid offense and productive offense as well.
The only thing I'm concerned about for Will in this up-speed offense is that I know it bit Missouri a little bit because they were really fast with Josh Heupel. So they were fun to watch and they were really fast. However, when they would make, sometimes that got the defense in a bad spot. So while I think they're going to go quick, I don't want them to go too quick. And I think they're going to have to balance that out in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think that's a really good take on your part. And that's, something in my opinion that I think when people are looking at this South Carolina team going into this season, I think that's one thing people aren't giving enough credit to when they're making their predictions for South Carolina, or taking into account enough to me, is how much of an impact Brian McClendon at OC and Dan Werner at quarterback coach, and just kind of this offensive philosophy changing, how much this offense is going to change. But I do agree with you 100%. I mean, it's I have a faith and trust in the coaching staff. I don't think they're going to go too fast for their own good, if that makes sense. I just don't, like you're saying, Will Muschamp is still a guy that if he can win a game 17-14 or 10-7, I mean, I think he's the kind of guy that'll do it. I don't think they're going to go too fast to put his defense in trouble, but I think that's a great point you make, and I think it's a realistic concern to have for sure. So
I think you have to be able to have that gear when you need it, but not go to it all the time. So I think that's going to be how Will is going to say, hey, here's how I want it used. Like when we go to the whip, I want to go super fast, but that doesn't mean we're going to the whip on the first play and for the entire game and entire season.
Yeah, 100%. So one of the guys that's going to make or help that effort on offense is a guy, Deebo Samuel. You talked about him a little bit. Simply put, when healthy, Peters, he's the best player in college football.
Boy, it's tough because there's so, you look at Bryce Love, you look at Khalil Tate, there's so many great players. I think that special teams wise, he's as good as I've seen almost since, remember Trendon Holiday that played for LSU back in the day, who was like 5'1". Like,
yeah,
he's one of the guys, the very few, and I put Saquon Barkley in this group last year, in the fact of when he gets the chance to get the ball, you can't go anywhere. Like if you're a Gamecock fan or you're just a college football fan, you're like, they're kicking to Deebo. Like you need to sit down and watch television, or probably stand up, because he's going to do something exciting. So the question is how they get him involved in the game outside of special teams. How much do you use him as a wide receiver? As you put him in the slot, you got to get the ball in his hands. But I don't think that, you develop a whole slew of plays for him as well too. The only concern I have offensively is, honestly, when you lose a guy like Hayden Hurst, that's such a big, such a big loss for him going into the NFL. So I'll be kind of curious to see what the Gamecocks do as far as the tight end situation.
Yeah, and kind of where those receptions go as well. I agree. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where those receptions go, as far as, does someone fill the shoes, or, do as best they can to fill the shoes of Hayden Hurst? Do those receptions go to maybe the running backs out of the backfield? Does it go to more to wide receivers? We'll see. Speaking of the wide receivers, just that wide receiver core in general. I mean, not only Deebo Samuel, who we all know what he can do when he's on the field, but you've got Brian Edwards. Yeah, I think Brian Edwards is one of the most underrated wide receivers maybe in the country. Shi Smith and Ortre Smith were two very, very talented freshmen who had really good campaigns last season. Talk about your impressions of the wide receiver core. I mean, do you think this could be the best individual unit in the SEC, or is that going too far?
No, I mean, I think the best individual wide receiver unit is still going to be Ole Miss. I mean, they got A.J. Brown, DeMarcus Lodge, and DK Metcalf. But the capability and the different types of looks that the Smiths can give, as well as Edwards, and adding Deebo, and 100% healthy Deebo, I mean, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find them not be the second best. I mean, listen, Ole Miss's wide receiver core is the best in the country, in my mind, not just the SEC or I'm talking about the entire NCAA football. So that's tough to beat that crew out. But again, there's probably 90 other coaches right now that would kill to have Will Muschamp's wide receiver core going into the 2018 season.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be fun. Those teams face off against each other early November. I'd expect a lot of points in that game, without a doubt.
I expect a lot of NFL scouts to be watching that game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, absolutely. You talked a little bit about Jake Bentley earlier, and, he's a guy obviously on our show we've talked a ton about. We just spent our entire last show looking ahead and previewing the offense position by position. Jake Bentley, like you mentioned, this is a huge year for him. He mentioned a lot of SEC Media Days how he thinks going back to the up-tempo offense is going to be maybe the best thing to happen to him in his college career. And we obviously know what the struggles were with Kurt Roper at OC, and just the struggles last year overall with the offense. one of our friends of the show, Brad Crawford, who works for 247 or 24/7 Sports, he made a good point, and a point we've made as well, is that Jake Bentley, simply put, just needs to be better in bigger games like the Georgia game, Clemson, even Florida last year for 3/4 against Michigan. And I'm not going to put it all on his back, but I think overall as an offense they can be better. But what do you, Peter? I mean, what do you want to see out of Jake Bentley this season? And do you think that he, at times, does he look a little gun shy to you? Is he a guy that needs to kind of show up when the lights come on? Or, what is your overall take of Jake Bentley heading to his junior year?
Honestly, I think the fast-paced offense is going to help Jake, because I think sometimes Jake last year was thinking too much. If that makes sense.
Agreed.
Like he was trying a little bit, almost trying a little too hard. And I think the fast-paced offense is going to help him just be a quarterback and react a little bit, as opposed to, hey, I need to, here's this wide receiver. It looks sometimes like late in the season he was trying to do calculus, right? He was he was waiting to pull the trigger, and then when he did and hesitated a little bit for thinking, he tried to fit in the ball into spaces that just flat out, you can't do against SEC opponents. So I think for me, the thing is he didn't think about playing, he didn't think about the position when he was thrust into that his freshman year, right? Like he was just like, hey, dude, you just need to react and play. And he did that. I think he thought a little bit too much last year. I think now it's just going to be like fast, react, go play football, and go kill it. And I think he's going to have success.
Yeah, no, that's a great point you make, and that's something we've talked about a lot too. Is it definitely looked like you could look at Jake Bentley's face and just see the wheels turning in his head. Yeah, and I think that could be blamed for part of the reason some of the missed throws he had where guys were just wide open, and maybe he just he overthought it a little bit too much and didn't hit them. So yeah, like I said, I definitely agree with you and think the up tempo offense is going to be beneficial to him if nothing else. Go ahead.
No, I just think, again, that's one of the reasons why. I mean, this is, this offense could put up some monster numbers. And again, it's almost like a golfer. Stop thinking about your swing and just hit the ball. And that's what they need Jake Bentley to do at the quarterback position.
Absolutely. So let's turn it over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Will Muschamp's specialty. My take, Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Will Muschamp, obviously, he's a defensive guru. South Carolina has put up fantastic numbers on defense the first 2 years, maybe with lesser talent, like you mentioned in the beginning. They lose Sky Moore on that side of the ball, lose a couple guys off the defensive line, little thin at safety. But am I wrong, as someone that follows South Carolina, am I wrong for just assuming that South Carolina is going to figure it out and be, if nothing else, solid on that side of the ball? Simply put, just because you got Will Muschamp running the show, and we've seen over his coaching tenure what he does with defenses.
Yeah, I mean, I think over and over as you get closer and closer to the season, you realize that, I mean, Will is as good as finding talent as anybody. And it may not be 5-star talent, but it may be 3-star guys that he can coach up. So, again, you've got to think that Muschamp, being the guy, the recruiter that he is, he's not missing on a bunch of kids. And here's the deal. I think Kevin Sumlin used to chase recruiting rankings and 5-star guys that weren't a fit for his program. Recruits kids that says, you know what, this kid may be a 3-star, but he's a perfect 3-star for us on the defensive side. Or perfect, 2-star that nobody gave a lot of love for, but he fits perfect in this secondary and what we need. So to me, I think that's what made Dan Mullen so good at Mississippi State, is that he found, quote unquote, inferior talent and coached them up. I don't think it's inferior talent. I think just Will knows the diamonds in the rough that are going to fit his program. And that's why I think he's the cream of the crop when it comes to guys that can make and coach their team better.
Yeah, and I mean, perfect example, DJ Wanham, who was at SEC Media Days. I mean, he was a guy out of the state of Georgia, 3-star prospect. I think I'm not sure how many other offers he had, but I know Indiana was like his leading school. And I just imagine now that guy went to Indiana, he would be, tearing up the Big Ten. But I mean, that's just, like you said, that's just kind of a true testament to what Will Muschamp can do. I mean, he found a guy who'd fit in his system. And I mean, obviously, I think Wanham's an all SEC caliber player, so it's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, Will's just comfortable, and I think that's the whole deal. I know Ed Ogeron wasn't comfortable last year. I know other coaches that haven't been comfortable before, but Will is comfortable with his guys, and he has the space. He has the coaching staff that he wants. You know, I mean, that's the deal that Alabama has to deal with every single year. Is all of a sudden, boom, you got to replace assistant coaches left and right because guys are getting, you know, picked away. For Will can say, these are the guys that I want, work with me, and he's able to have that. And if it doesn't work out, like the Roper situation, they're able to pull the trigger on a new coordinator. So, again, that's why Will has found himself in a good spot, and I think that could be a really symbiotic relationship there down in South Carolina.
Absolutely. So finishing up here, Peter, I want to put you on the spot a little bit. Obviously, again, you've been pretty vocal about how you think South Carolina is going to do this season, but overall, you know, your predictions for this 2018 South Carolina team, do you think they can make a run to Atlanta and possibly get to the SEC championship?
I absolutely do. Now, of course, you know, I'll be on freezing cold takes, I'm sure, down the road and those guys. But I still look at if they can stay healthy, that this is a team that's possible to win the East. As far as when they on week 2, I'm still all in on the idea that they win week 2 against Georgia. I mean, to me, hey, listen, I've been wrong before and I could be wrong again, but I think this team is talented enough to win in week 2. And I think by winning in week 2, all of a sudden this team can believe in itself. And as long as this offense doesn't go too fast, absolutely, this is a team that can make a run in Atlanta. Listen, I know Georgia is good. I think they just lost so much leadership last year that they're going to try to struggle, and they're going to struggle to find that right off the bat. And that's why, listen, if this game was week 7 against South Carolina, I'm probably picking Georgia just simply because I think they have more talent. But because it's week 2, I think that Will Muschamp knows his buddy Kirby Smart, knows the weaknesses, and and that crowd is going to be just flipping nuts. I wish I was there.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually bought my ticket a couple weeks ago, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I also think as well that, you know, South Carolina's got we're going to come out with our predictions a couple weeks, but obviously I think they've got a great chance to win that game. And, you know, I know a lot can happen throughout the course of a season. You mentioned like injuries and just teams can get a lot better, a lot worse. You know, the teams that South Carolina plays on their schedule. But I tell you what, me personally, looking at that schedule, in my opinion, if South Carolina beats Georgia and doesn't win the East, I think it's a huge I think looking right now, it's a massive failure. I mean, is that being too harsh?
Well, again, I mean, I think Kentucky is going to be better than people think this year. I think Florida is going to be much improved. I think the East and even Missouri is going to be kind of a thorn in people's side with Drew Lock coming back in. So, I mean, again, I think at the end of the day that whoever wins the East could possibly have 2 losses. And that's why the tiebreaker is going to be so important, because I think Georgia is capable of losing 2 games in conference play. And that's why that game in week 2 is just such a monster game for the Gamecocks. Absolutely.
Well, Peter, had a lot of fun, man. Really, again, appreciate you taking the time coming on. Let everybody know just kind of where they can find not only your show, but also, you know, you as well on social media.
Yeah, man, at Peter Burns ESPN on Twitter. I'm always into upsetting people there. You can catch me on Sirius XM 7 to 10 every single morning, or I got a Sunday morning show on ESPN Radio from 7 to 9 as well. So one of these days I want to get a day off, but until then, it's good to always talk football.
Absolutely, yeah, and like I can definitely speak. If you haven't checked out any of Peter's work yet or haven't tuned in, be sure to do so. I mean, they do a great job over at SEC Network, and Peter's always a good time to listen to. So, Peter, again, appreciate you coming on. Let's do it again sometime, all right?
Hey, hopefully we're doing it in Columbia in celebrating a couple victories. So we'll do it down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Appreciate it. Again, you guys know where to find us, the Spurs Up Show on iTunes, the Stitcher app, all of our social media handles. For Peter Burns and Thomas Floyd, I'm Chris Phillips. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll catch you next time.